You're going to go back to your parents' house now that my kid is dead, right? We're going to stay here since it would be heartbreaking to see this house empty. There's really nothing to worry about. This followed the unexpected death of my dear husband. Soon after the funeral was over, it was his parents who stood in front of me, utterly broken-hearted. Although I must admit that I didn't have many memories with my husband at this house, why was I the one who had to leave before I had a chance to dry my tears? My mother-in-law told me as much with a cold heart. My name is Hannah. I'm employed for a real estate firm. It was via the real estate company I work for that I met my husband, Tyler. He was a colleague of mine's brother. Because their workplaces were close, he frequently showed his face among the brothers, who were very close to one another. I also got along well with the coworker, who would eventually become my brother-in-law while we were clerking together. He introduced me to his own brother through this link. We spent more time together, and they eventually invited me to lunch more frequently. Although Tyler was intelligent and pleasant to chat to, I never thought of him as a man. Up until the day something happened to alter our relationship, I assumed he felt the same way. A last-minute issue arose at the restaurant where we were supposed to meet, and only my colleague could attend. But canceling the reservation felt like a waste, so we ended up enjoying time together as just the two of us. Later on, I discovered that everything had been prearranged. My brother-in-law had purposefully set it up so that Tyler and I would be alone with great food, at Tyler's request. Our dialogue flowed, and before long, we were exchanging views and details about our past, which quickly increased our closeness. His kind grin drew me in more the more I got to know him. That day turned out to be a turning moment in our relationship. Our journey to marriage was not long in coming. Without the support of my brother-in-law, this amazing progress might not have taken place. For all that was about to happen in the future, as well as for that, I felt incredibly appreciative of him. The day has arrived to finally meet my in-laws. Despite my nervousness, my in-laws gave me a warm welcome. The endearing conversations went on, and my anxiety progressively subsided. I'm very glad you could make it. Hannah, I had been excited to meet you. My mother-in-law, who was setting up, said, I have prepared a lot of things for you, hoping that today will be a wonderful day. My in-laws were likewise quite independent and amiable, and my husband, the eldest son, was a lot like them. It was a comfortable stay at their house, and I felt so grateful for them. Even after a few cordial exchanges, they stayed a suitable distance and simply supported our future, not placing any pressure on marriage or parenting. We were dreaming of creating our own house when gradually the subject of living together came up. My grandfather actually left me a house, I said as my in-laws nodded and listened carefully. As the sole grandchild, my grandfather showered me with love and left me a nicely remodeled house and acreage. Not long after the processes related to inheritance were finished, my grandfather passed away. Benefiting from redevelopment, the land was in a prime location and was rising in value quickly. With knowledge in the real estate business, I knew that it would be more beneficial for us to sell it rather than live there ourselves. That way, we would have sufficient funds for our dream home project. Well, I was grateful for my grandfather's profound love. The will allowed us to freely dispose of the house, so we were considering selling it. We started a new life on that land after getting married. However, due to the distance from our workplaces, it was difficult to live there permanently, no matter how good the location was. While preparing to sell the property, something unexpected happened. My husband, a salesperson, was suddenly assigned a transfer. His company, a large corporation with several branches nationwide, decided to transfer him despite knowing we were newlyweds because they deemed he was the only right candidate. I will definitely come back on holidays. Plus, my parents plan to visit, so don't overexert yourself. But could you take them out sometimes? I don't mind going out with them since your parents are kind. However, selling the house might take a bit longer, my husband said. It was decided that my husband would relocate alone. Even with this sudden turn of events, I suppressed my loneliness and anxiety and decided to wait for the day we could live together again, like my husband promised. My mother-in-law would visit often, especially on the weekends. She once shared her experience of spending time alone multiple times while raising young children during her husband's business trips. Even without children, you can create family memories. Do you want to go out together? A little shopping might cheer you up. Let's go, Hannah. Thanks to my mother-in-law's thoughtfulness, I was able to spend time without feeling lonely, and my weekends became busier with various activities. However, as time passed, a concerning pattern began to emerge. Every weekend, without fail, my mother-in-law would almost certainly take me out somewhere. It was fine at first, but after a month, her invitations became increasingly forceful, showing little consideration for my health or household chores. When I mentioned I'd like to rest this weekend, she would sulk as if I was being selfish. "But it'll be fun to go out together. You don't dislike going out with me, do you?" she would ask. "No, it's not like that. It's just that since we've been going out every week, I thought you might need some rest too," I would respond. My mother-in-law's face would turn gloomy. Even when I tried to clear the misunderstanding, she wouldn't listen. Once I reluctantly agreed, she would quickly regain her smile and act as if she had forgotten her persistent invitations. But doubts about her behavior slowly grew bigger in my mind. The places she took me often involved expensive spending, brand name shopping followed by expensive meals. The payment was always passed on to me. My mother-in-law would often leave the store before me, making it my responsibility to settle the bill. There were no thanks or reimbursements afterward. Indeed, I owned a house and had a stable salary, so I was financially comfortable. However, my husband and I had always lived frugally, so I felt uneasy about my mother-in-law's lavish spending. On occasions when my father-in-law joined, my expenses would increase even further. I felt the need to address this situation, but found it difficult to discuss with my husband. He had promised he would definitely return home, but that promise was challenging to fulfill due to his busy schedule at the new location. "Are you okay with going out with Mom every week? Any concerns?" My husband would ask over video calls, visibly tired from work. Hesitant to bring up my issues with my mother-in-law, I would pretend to be fine. "Your mom is really kind to me. Take care of yourself, Tyler." "I'm fine, so don't worry," I would reassure him, yet I lacked the courage to refuse the financial demands from my in-laws. Their behavior became excessive, and when I mentioned I couldn't go out one day, they made a surprising suggestion. "Then could you lend us a bit of money?" "Am I supposed to provide the money?" I asked. "Just a little is fine. We've already made a reservation at a restaurant. We'll invite another friend, but we're short on cash and need your help." To avoid conflict, I decided to lend them the money. I took out the money and gave it to them, but I never mentioned their request in front of my husband. "Maybe you should talk to Tyler about it," I suggested casually to my mother-in-law, only to be shocked by her response. It would be embarrassing to talk to Tyler about such things. They felt ashamed to ask their eldest son, but had no qualms about asking me. Resigned, I accepted my mother-in-law's demands, and financially supporting them became seemingly normal. The money I gave them as an allowance at least stopped her from forcing me to go out. I understood the issue was escalating, but struggled with ineffective conversations and personal exhaustion. My mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly incomprehensible and bizarre. She would show up unannounced, inspecting my home as if it were her own, causing me to fear my privacy was being invaded. "Was this something left by your grandfather, Hannah? This furniture is lovely. It's amazing to have such quality items." Some furniture included antiques my grandfather cherished. My mother-in-law was fascinated by them, often admiring and treating them as if they were her own during her visits. This place was a shared space between my husband and me. I finally decided to discuss my mother-in-law's actions with my husband, while uncertain how he would react. I hoped for advice on handling her behavior. Her actions were unpleasant, and even if she was family, invading our private life was unacceptable. Nevertheless, a faint hope blossomed in my heart when the date of my husband Tyler's return from his solo assignment was determined. The financial demands from my in-laws would end if I just endured it a little bit longer. I was eagerly awaiting the reunion with my husband, but the situation took an unexpected turn. Tyler suddenly collapsed. My mind froze. The news came from a colleague at his assignment location, and I rushed to the hospital immediately. We didn't know if it was due to overwork or an unexpected heart issue, but Tyler had collapsed. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, Tyler couldn't be saved. My beloved husband, always in perfect health, had departed from this world way too suddenly. Unable to accept this reality, I barely remember the day of the funeral, shrouded in profound sorrow. My brother-in-law came to help, taking care of things. "Thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to rely on you at a time like this," I said. "What are you talking about? It's my brother's funeral. Besides, is everything okay with the land? Is the house ready after the funeral?" While tidying up after the funeral, I had a deep conversation with my brother-in-law. I nodded, responding that everything was settled. Days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws came to our house together. However, it was clear they weren't there to offer condolences. "It's truly unfortunate that our son passed away so suddenly, but don't worry, we're here for you. Everything will be all right." My mother-in-law's face curiously bore a smile. More shockingly, she had arranged a truck loaded with furniture and belongings from her home. I was struck silent by the shock and confusion. Clearly, this was a move-in, not a visit. Without any forewarning, my in-laws intended to move into our house. The reason for their actions was unfathomable, yet the answer to my questions quickly became apparent. "Are you aiming for our land?" The anxiety I had long harbored slipped out when I asked. My mother-in-law coldly replied with a laugh, "The value of this property has increased significantly. We've always wanted it. As a matter of fact, your marriage was only approved because you inherited this. We agreed to the marriage because you were the heir." Filled with despair, I lost my voice. "So you mean to live with me?" What a ridiculous question. To such an inquiry, my mother-in-law coldly retorted, "Tyler's sudden death was an immeasurable shock, but in reality, even without his death, I had planned to take over this house eventually. We intended to drive you out and become the new owners of this land." She seemed to misunderstand that I had already decided to leave this place. "Now that my son has passed away, you'll return to your parents' place, right? It would be sad if this house was left empty, so we'll live here. You don't need to worry at all." The moment my mother-in-law's expression turned into a sinister smile, anxiety swirled within me. Yet I mustered the courage to correct her misunderstanding. "I've already sold the house," I said, without mocking my mother-in-law's assumption. I barely managed to explain while suppressing my smile. My mother-in-law stood dumbfounded. Just then, a new moving company truck arrived. "Excuse me, we have a delivery for this address." Another moving company had already parked there, causing confusion as the newly arrived workers asked us for clarification. The movers my mother-in-law hired came to us, realizing they couldn't begin their work, and the situation became chaotic. I urged my in-laws to explain the situation, but they fled and were unable to provide clear answers. Realizing that arguing wouldn't solve anything, I began to regain my composure. I immediately instructed the movers my mother-in-law hired to leave the premises. "This residence has already been purchased by someone else, and the contract is complete. A new family is moving in, so it wouldn't be appropriate to bring in someone else's belongings." The movers were visibly shocked by this development when suddenly a luxury car arrived. A seemingly wealthy couple and their children got out of the car. This house was no longer mine. The family that emerged from the car was the new owners of the home. My in-laws were bewildered by the situation, struggling to grasp what was happening. "Please move the truck. We need to start unloading for the new residents. After the truck my mother-in-law called was moved, the other movers began their work swiftly, starting to bring in the new furniture that had been purchased. My in-laws, unable to accept this change, obstinately blocked the entrance. The new homeowners, keeping their family safe inside the car, approached me to clarify the situation. "Who are these people? This is the house we bought. Please have the truck removed immediately." Surprised by my in-laws' unexpected visit, I apologized and tried to calm the situation down. However, my in-laws were adamant, forcefully trying to enter the house. The interior of the house had completely changed from what they remembered. All the furniture we used was gone. My mother-in-law was shocked by the scene, becoming agitated and causing a commotion. "What is the meaning of this? The house is empty. Even the antique furniture and lights that I cherished are all gone. Explain this." She was furious, unable to comprehend the current situation. The silence was suddenly broken by the new owner's angry shout, "I'll call the police." That outcry acted like a start signal, prompting my father-in-law to hurriedly pull my mother-in-law away and leave the scene. Quickly, my mother-in-law, who had been agitated by the events, gradually regained her composure. Meanwhile, I expressed my apologies to the new residents, feeling a strong sense of responsibility to ensure such troubles wouldn't recur in the future. I had the new residents record detailed information about my in-laws, including their contact details and names, managing to defuse the situation. At that moment, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion throughout my body, but it wasn't over yet. I went to my in-laws to explain calmly that our move had already been completed. Just before my husband had passed away, we planned to sell this house, along with the land, so everything is proceeding as scheduled. I told them this plan had been on hold temporarily due to my husband's transfer, but ultimately everything progressed smoothly. Behind the smooth transition was a crucial factor: my brother-in-law, struggling with the never-ending financial demands from my in-laws and not wanting to burden my husband with worries. My brother-in-law was a savior to me. He had long been troubled by the poor relationship with his parents and had told me to consult him any time if I had any issues with them. Following his advice, I concluded that selling the land early was the best strategy to avoid losing the property to my in-laws, even though it was a valuable inheritance from my grandfather. Determined to maintain the peaceful relationship built between my husband and in-laws, I promised my brother-in-law to keep it a secret, ensuring peace within the family. With great courage, I opened up and shared all the events with him. Upon hearing this, my brother-in-law's expression turned to anger, showing his strong resentment towards his parents. My brother-in-law, who worked at the same place as me, was aware of the schemes his parents had been plotting and disclosed the truth to me. He passionately explained that Tyler, his brother, was the most important family member to him in the world, and as Tyler's wife, I was also an invaluable part of his family. My parents are either planning to live in that house themselves or waiting for a convenient opportunity to evict you and Tyler and eventually take over the property, he told me with a serious tone. According to my brother-in-law, my in-laws were extravagant, lacked common sense, were overly concerned with appearances, and wouldn't hesitate to use any means to achieve their goals. Regarding my mother-in-law, she was notably self-centered, lacking in compassion. Her behavior often disregarded others. While she always acted politely in public, her true nature was selfish, and she couldn't be described as genuine or kind. Learning about the true sides and everyday behavior of my in-laws from my brother-in-law was incredibly shocking for me. They always put on a good front in front of Tyler, the family's eldest son, so my husband was completely unaware of their characteristics or plans. My brother-in-law strongly advised that we quickly put the house on the market and sell it to prevent losing it due to my in-law's scheme. Convinced by his persuasion, we recognized the importance of selling the house and decided to proceed with the sale promptly, even if it meant parting with a valuable property inherited from my beloved grandfather. If it became a barrier for our relationship as a couple, it was a decision made prioritizing family harmony. I strongly wished to avoid leaving a source of discord for the future, especially due to the property's value. This decision was by no means arbitrary. My husband and I had discussed this matter extensively while he was still alive, and he fully agreed with it. He understood my predicament of not being able to consult anyone, and upon learning about his parents' actions, he firmly stated that he could never condone their behavior. He told me, "I'm sorry for not realizing this, Hannah. If you're okay with it, let's sell the house before my parents can do anything. I'm really sorry to let go of the precious house inherited from your grandfather. No, if it prevents future problems, I believe my grandfather would support this decision," I responded. My decision was not to prioritize the relationship with my in-laws, but to protect the future my husband and I were supposed to have together. Throughout the selling process, my brother-in-law, who was well versed in real estate, spared no effort in finding the most suitable buyer. My tasks were to find a new residence and move as soon as possible, ensuring that my in-laws wouldn't notice while maintaining my usual daily life. The house, slightly worn from our use, was almost as good as new, which we considered when setting the price. As a result, an appropriate buyer appeared surprisingly quickly, and the process progressed smoothly. The family that just arrived became the new owners of the house. Our original plan was to eagerly await Tyler's return, but fate forced a change in plans. Tyler was also pleased with the sale of the house, and that was my only consolation. The way the movers moved the furniture in so quickly was like a precision machine in action. Meanwhile, my in-laws, forced to leave the property, watched the moving scene in astonishment. When their hired movers angrily demanded explanations amidst the confusion, my in-laws were at a loss for words. For the movers, it was an incomprehensible situation of overlapping moving tasks. Declaring it a contractual violation and comforting my in-laws, who failed to provide a proper explanation, eventually led to the furniture being returned to the original place. However, the unexpected situation incurred additional charges. Seemingly grasping the situation, my mother-in-law approached me, pleading in a trembling voice. Considering the home was my eldest son's wife's inheritance, it should also belong to us. "No, this situation is absurd," I replied. Her futile attempts and excuses had no impact on me. I completely ignored their arguments and decided to leave with my belongings. The property now belonged to the new family, and I had no obligation or right to answer any further. After Tyler's funeral, where I encountered my in-laws, they seemed eager to discuss the house issue, but ultimately left quietly without saying anything. I had no obligation to convey anything to my in-laws and had almost no words to exchange with them. Now, in my new residence, I am leading a peaceful life in this small house where we were originally supposed to start anew. I was faced with deep sorrow due to his absence. The savings from selling the house were substantial, but without my husband, the dream of building a new home had vanished. I returned to work, cherishing the precious memories with my husband, and am gradually regaining a positive outlook. As for my in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, it seems that unresolved grievances were accumulating. However, I had no desire to engage with them any further and had not shared my new address, leaving no possibility of contacting me. My mother-in-law's frustrations only grew. Although she once boasted to her eldest son, she was now unable to visit my brother-in-law and remained unaware of my whereabouts. The pressure built up, and my mother-in-law finally lost her mind. In the dead of night, she scattered gasoline around the vicinity of the sold property. Fortunately, a local resident who happened to pass by became suspicious and immediately stopped her, preventing anything major from happening. When reported to the police, it was discovered that she had prepared newspapers and a lighter, and my mother-in-law was arrested for attempted arson. The homeowner, who almost became the victim of arson, was so angry that they threatened to sue me as well. After learning who the intrusive woman was, I apologized repeatedly. But since it was an attempted arson, there was nothing I could do about the crime my mother-in-law committed. Ultimately, her obsession with the house led to her prosecution. Through multiple apologies, I managed to seek forgiveness and promised to ensure such an incident would never happen again. My mother-in-law was raised in a pampered environment, accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. Facing a situation where she couldn't have that house, frustration and jealousy emerged. She reluctantly began to resent the house and land, resorting to crime, which eventually led her to get imprisoned. My father-in-law, who was normally supportive, started to constantly quarrel with her after the arrest and ultimately chose to abandon her and get a divorce. As a result, my mother-in-law completely lost a home to return to after her sentence. However, this can also be seen as the consequence of her own choices. My brother-in-law felt lonely after losing his brother, but comforted me, saying, "I can endure it because I still have you." The relationship with my in-laws had ended, but that didn't mean I had lost all my family. Determined to aim for a peaceful everyday life, also for my late husband, I moved forward.